What's up, guys? So I'm super excited to make this video today. After I posted my last two steelhead fishing videos, I had a bunch of people ask what exactly my setup was that I used to catch these fish. So that's kind of what I'm going to go over today. I'm going to start off with the rod and reel that I use, and then I'm going to end with the flies and the bead. So I'm gonna kind of work my way down the setup. First of all, I'm fishing the Great Lakes. I'm actually fishing Lake Ontario Tributaries with this setup, and it is like nymphing setup. I'm not going to get into streamers or anything like that, or really any other gear that I use. I'm just going to go over the basic setup to catch fish. At the end of this video, there is a diagram that shows kind of like a breakdown of everything that I'm saying, in case you want just like an easy like summary to look at. That'll be at the very end of this video, and I have Amazon links that kind of have just about everything that I'm going to show you guys. Some of the stuff I couldn't find any links for it, or they don't sell it and stuff like that, but there's products that are similar to that linked in the description below. So if that's interesting to you guys, if you want to see what my setup is, stay tuned because I'm going to show you everything in depth. So let's get started here. We're going to start off with the rod. So what I use for my rod, I like an 8-weight. A lot of people use 7-weights around here, which I have used in the past. I used to have a 7-weight 10-foot rod, and I really liked it, but when I was fishing by myself, I had a little bit of a trouble landing fish, and it just didn't have the backbone that I needed. So I went back and I stuck it with this rod here, which is the first steelhead rod I ever bought. It bought from Cabela's. It was a kit. It came with the rod, the reel, the line, and everything for about 80 bucks. I bought this in 2018. They still make a similar version of this, but they don't make this exact one anymore. But I love this rod. I use it for king salmon, steelhead, browns, smallmouth, pike, and pretty much everything in between. But yeah, you can use like a 9-weight if you really want to, but that's more like salmon and like bigger rivers. But the 8-weight 9-foot that I have here works perfect for what I'm doing, at least. Has a little bit more backbone, and like the shorter length, it not being 10-foot, really helps me land fish. So I have a couple of combos that were similar to the one that I bought. If you're a beginner and you want to get into it, you can get a really affordable setup. You don't have to spend $1 million to get into steelhead fishing, especially with the rod. The rod's not that important, in my opinion. You need something with backbone. You need something that's going to hold up to these fish. But next, we're going to move on to the reel, which this is what I have. This is a Ross Evolution LTX. It's the 7-8 weight. Mine's blue because it was like limited edition, but it comes in matte black and silver, and I love this reel. It is a little pricier. It was about $400 for the reel, but it has a really good drag system, and I love it. Like, I used to use the kit reel that came with the Cabela's setup, but this drag is definitely a lot better, and it's like a very smooth drag. When your fish starts running, it's not like snapping the line, so you can get away with using a really light leader or tippet with this reel, and it's really pretty. That's another reason I like it. But Ross does make a couple other reels too that are a little bit more affordable. They make a reel called the Animus, I believe, and that's a little bit more affordable than this one. But I love it especially for the smooth drag. It helps a lot, especially when you're fighting really big steelhead. Like I said, you don't need to spend $1 million on your rod and reel setup. There's a bunch of different reels you can get. Orvis makes great ones. Redington makes great ones. There's a bunch. I'm definitely not a gear expert. I kind of use what I have. I'm not super picky on gear. So there's that. And then the line that I use is my favorite line that I've used for steelhead. For sure, it is this line. It is Rio. It's Trout Steelhead Indicator line, which I bought it because it's what I'm doing. I'm fishing a nymph rig with an indicator, and this line makes it super easy to mend your setup. It says 7-weight, but I have 8-weight. This is from a different rod, but that line works perfect. But before that, I use just a general, any floating line should do fine. So after your fly fishing line, you're going to attach a leader to that, obviously. So what I use, my favorite ones are these Rio 3X leaders. You can use heavier leaders if you're going for bigger fish, or I wouldn't really go below a 3X. There's really not much of a point. But I like the 9-foot. If you use 12-foot, it just gets a little bit too long and your line gets a little out of control. So the 9-foot works really well. And usually when I put this on, I loop it through because it already has the loop, which is super helpful. Makes everything really quick. But when I do it, I usually put it on and then I'll cut like probably not quite a foot off, but I'll cut like 8 inches or so of like that really like thin line. And that's usually what I'll like trim that off just a little bit for a little bit extra security. And from there, from your leader, you're going to either do a blood knot or you're going to use a micro swivel to connect your tippet. So I usually use a micro swivel. I'm not really good with knots. It takes a long time to tie them. So I usually end up doing like a micro swivel. I don't even know if you can, it's really small. But you can get like any brand of those. I don't even remember what these were. But use this to connect your leader to your tippet. And they're really durable. I've never had one break or anything like that. And it makes it really easy if you want to change out your tippet size or anything like that. So that's what I use. And then on your leader, you're going to add your strike indicator. There's a bunch of different brands of these you can use, and where you put it on your leader is going to depend on the depth of water that you're fishing. So my rule of thumb for where I put my strike indicator is going to be, I'm going to kind of guesstimate how deep the water that I'm fishing is. Let's say it's like a 5-foot pool or whatever, run. I'm probably going to put my strike indicator about a foot or two higher than that. So I'm going to put it at like 6 to 7 feet above your fly. And you can adjust this to whatever you like. I usually start out with it a little bit on the longer side, and then if I'm getting caught up on rocks and stuff, I'll move it so that I'm not getting caught up on rocks anymore. But you don't want to have it too far down either, because you want that fly to be pretty close to the bottom, because that's generally where your steelhead are going to be sitting. So I used to use primarily thingamabobbers for my strike indicators, and they work really well, but they do tend to kink the line, which gets frustrating because leaders are expensive. So I moved on and I started using these airlock ones that you twist the top on, and they're super nice. I really like them. They work really well. I started using them this season in the fall, and I haven't used a thingamabobber since. They don't kink the line at all, and they work really well. They're really durable and lightweight. So now I'm going to move on to the tippet that I use. And this, I used to use mono tippet, just like regular fly, like tippet that you get, like Rio mono, like on the spool kind of thing. But then I recently switched over to using fluorocarbon because I can buy a bigger spool of it, and it just works a little bit better. It gets your fly down faster, it sinks, it's less visible to the fish. Not that I don't know if they can really tell the difference, but it does seem to work really well for me, so that's what I changed to. But if you only have like monofilament, like regular fly fishing tippet, that works fine. Like I used to use 3X, 4X, and 2X were my main sizes that I would use for that. And if the water was really, really clear or something like that, I would even go down to like 5 or 6X to catch steelhead. But now I have fluorocarbon. So I use this primarily. This is a 6-pound fluorocarbon. It works really well. I use this in most water conditions. I also have 4-pound. This is a different brand, but I don't think it really matters too much. This one's a little bit cheaper than the last one I showed. So I use 4-pound a lot, actually. Some people think I'm crazy. I don't know. I catch a lot of fish on 4-pound, and it seems to work really well, especially if you're fishing really heavily trafficked areas. And if the water is really clear, 4-pound seems to work great. But I also keep 8-pound in my bag in case I'm fishing a really big river, or if I'm fishing for salmon, or the water's really muddy or something like that. I don't really use the 8-pound that much, but I do have it just in case. Like I said, you can use mono, you can use fluoro. It's really a personal preference. And I usually do about 18 inches or so from my micro swivel. And that seems to work really well. It gives me enough room. I can attach a sinker to it if I need to. And it just usually makes it a good length for the whole setup. So before I get into talking about flies and beads that I use, sometimes I do use a little bit of weight on my setup. And this is usually if I'm using like a plastic bead, or if the water is really fast or really deep or something like that. I'll tend to use just a little like BB weight. Don't use lead because that's toxic and it's really bad for the environment. I usually use tin and it works fine, But like I said, I don't really like to use weight on my setup, and I'll explain why in 1 second. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys, this is the last setup that I used while fly fishing before everything was frozen. And you can see there, that's a glass bead. That's a 6mm glass bead. It's like a natural honey color. Works really well. And then I have a pheasant tail nymph on there. And so if you use glass beads, they're pretty heavy, so you usually can get away with not using any weight, which is what I like, because a lot of times if you use weight, you're crimping your line, you're kind of damaging your line a little bit. It can get tangled really easily. There's just more weight, and it's just one more thing that can get caught up on something. I don't know why, but whenever I seem to use weight, it gets tangled up a lot. So I found out about glass beads last year, and I love them. I use them in a lot of situations, especially these small ones work extremely well in smaller streams and stuff like that. But I have like a million colors of beads. We've got some bigger ones here. These are like an 8mm bead. I use Creek Candy Bead Company. I have the link in the description. They have really good prices, and they have so many different colors. If the water's clear, I tend to use like a pretty natural looking egg color. Like this. Like that would be like a peach. I love those kind of colors. And like the one I showed you before, that natural honey, works so good. It looks like a brown trout egg. So I use the smaller beads. If the water's clear, if the water is slower, smaller beads. If you're fishing a bigger river, faster water, deeper water, you're gonna wanna use the 8mm beads. Or I think they go up to 10mm too, but I don't usually fish with those. I also make my own trout beads sometimes if I want like a certain like custom color, but I can do a video on that if you guys wanna see how to make your own DIY trout beads. So that about sums it up with the glass beads. A lot of different colors. If I'm fishing dirty water, I've noticed that this kind of color, like this is, if it focuses, this is like a chartreuse and white bead pattern or color pattern, and that works really good in like a little bit muddier water. So yeah, that sums it up for glass beads. I usually don't use weight. The only time I don't like to use the glass beads is if the water I'm fishing is really slow, and sometimes the glass beads are too heavy and they sink right into like the mud or the gravel, and it gets really frustrating. Then you're gonna want to switch it up and go to the more commonly used plastic beads. So these are my plastic beads. I have a whole bunch of them. Just about every color. And I use those a lot. I really like this kind of color here, like this really like natural, like light peachy color. Works super good in like clear conditions. But yeah, I switch between plastic and glass beads. If I use plastic, I will use the little BB weight most of the time, just to get down there a little bit more. But it kind of just depends on the water conditions, on what you want to use. If you have a preference, if you like using plastic over glass or vice versa, then honestly, whatever you like to use. I just changed my setup dependent on the conditions of the water. And what you're going to do with the bead is you're going to attach it to your tippet using trout pegs, which you can get off of, I think they have them at Amazon. And some of them are like orange. But just make sure that your trout beads that you use, make sure that they fit with the trout peg. So you're gonna wanna attach your egg above your fly, whatever fly you choose. You're gonna want about 3 to 4 finger lengths. So this is, as you can see, it's 4, but I have smaller fingers, so you might wanna do 3. Now I'm gonna get into flies, which are my favorite thing. So everyone I talk to has a little bit of a different opinion on what to use for steelhead fly-wise. So me personally, I really like to catch big steelhead on small nymphs. As you can see, the last setup I used here, I had a little pheasant tail. I'll put the video of the fish that I caught off the setup so you guys can see. Like a lot of the times, people are just chucking like egg sacs at these fish's face all day, and then you come in with your fly rod and, you know, clean it up, because these people, they use the same things constantly. But like, I feel like fly fishermen have a big advantage because you can use stuff like this and get a good drift and make it look extremely natural. Okay, you can make it look extremely like a natural presentation which especially in your pressured areas, like up in New York, there's so many pressured areas. Using like the small flies can really be a huge advantage. You can get on a lot of fish. So that being said, this is half of my fly box. This is the first half, and I have a lot of nymphs in there. So on a clear day, I would go through and pick pretty much any of these. It's kind of like your preference, what you like to use. I've noticed that like flies like this seem to work really well, like with that like hackle kind of thing. I'm not that great with, I don't know the names of a lot of flies, but whatever this one is, I love it. Who's weighted, you can use one with a bead head, you can use one without a bead head. It's kind of up to you, like whatever you like to use, or if you need your setup to get down a little bit heavier, then obviously use the bead head. If the water's a little murkier, I'll use like these guys down on the bottom with the swiggle legs. Those work really well. But yeah, each stream is gonna be different too, so that's good to know. And in the winter, like little black stoneflies like I have right here, they work great. That's about it for the nymphs. And this is my other side of my fly box. It's a little bit crazier. As you can see, I have my egg imitations, I have my squirmies, and I have some just little like streamers, woolly buggers, stuff like that. So egg flies are really good to use in any situation because fish are eating eggs. So egg flies work great. Sometimes I will skip the bead and everything and just use an egg fly, especially if I'm in a really pressured area. Sometimes the fish get used to seeing beads over and over and over again, and if you present them with a single fly, I've actually had really good luck just catching fish like that, which you don't ever have to use a bead. First of all, you can just use flies. Where I am, I can only use one fly, but I know in some areas, like the Erie tribs, I'm pretty sure you can use like 2 flies. So if you want to use 2 flies, like, that's cool. Gives you more chances, stuff like that. I'm not gonna lie, my go-to fly for steelhead is definitely a squirmy wormy, especially in a little bit like off-colored water. It seems to work really well to catch steelhead and browns. Crush the squirmy. But yeah, like I said, that's probably my go-to other than nymphs and stuff. But yeah, so that's what that looks like. So I have a lot of flies. Where my flies from, it's called Big Y Fly Company. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just like their flies. Someone on Instagram told me about them, and they're really cheap, but they're really durable. That's where I got all those squirmies from. Some of the flies I do tie myself, but I'm not that great at it. So I'm still learning how to tie flies. Also, another great place to look for flies would be your local fly shops or your local tackle shops if they have flies and stuff like that. Your local people are gonna know like what flies are gonna work best for that area. So that's about all there really is to the setup. It's nothing too complicated, and when you're casting, just do a basic roll cast, and you usually don't have to cast really far either, but that setup right there should get you on a couple fish. It's what I use. And I mean, I usually end up catching a few, so it does pretty well. And it works on most rivers too. I fish a lot smaller streams usually than a lot of people do for steelhead and browns. That's just my preference. But yeah, if you guys like this video, if you want to see more like how-to videos or like setup videos or anything like that, just let me know and I'll try my best to make them. Like I said, there's going to be a diagram at the end of this video that's going to show you like exactly what I said. If I missed anything, it'll be on the diagram, and it'll show you everything from like the rod to the fly for the setup if you want to set it up yourself and go try and catch some steelhead. So please like and comment if you use this setup, or if you learned something, please let me know, because that's awesome. That's why I want to do this kind of stuff. So like, comment, subscribe, all that good business. I will see you guys on the next video, and I hope you guys have a great day.